Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. This is Jack Kang from NUA5, which is the Asian and Asian American Alumni Association. We are very, very honored to have you guys joining us from around the world. This is turning out to be the largest virtual event that NUA5 has hosted. So thank you again. We have a fantastic agenda today. All right, but before we begin, I just wanted to introduce a few points about NUA5. We were formed in the year 2020, which means this year is our 20th anniversary. We were recognized as a leader in virtual programming. We were one of the first ones to do Zoom during the pandemic, and that has served us well. We've grown double digits in the last 2 years consistently. We've also raised over $15,000 for the Asian American Studies program. As you could see from our operating board and our advisory board on the right, we have a wide profile, both on gender as well as age group. However, we're always looking to make our leadership team much more diverse because we realize there's so much diversity within our own diverse communities. So specifically, if you're an artist, storyteller, policymaker, or justice advocate, even a business leader, or want to just be a mentor, please raise your hand. And of course, alumni of the Asian American Studies program is definitely welcome. So how do you get involved? The easiest way is to just join one of our virtual communities on Facebook and LinkedIn. Just search NUA5. Also, if you're not getting our emails directly, you got to update your profile at our.northwestern.edu. I can't do that for you, but you have to actually go in there and subscribe to that email list. Okay, and then direct message us via Facebook or LinkedIn. Now, we are also co-sponsored by the Kellogg Club of Singapore. And such, I am introducing Audrey Chen.
Hi, good morning. Sorry, I was on mute. Very good morning to everybody from all around the world. It's 8 o'clock in the morning here in Singapore. And we'd like to say a huge thank you to NUA5 for the invitation. This is such a great event. We've had so much fun working with you guys. Briefly, the Kellogg Alumni Club of Singapore is an officially chartered international alumni club of Northwestern. And as one of a small handful of joint clubs, we are open to Singapore-based and Singapore-affiliated alumni across all schools and degree programs. And we're so proud to be part of this dynamic APAC region and to connect our members with organizations, programs, and alumni networks from all over the globe. So for more information or to attend our virtual programs, please email us at the email address that's included on the slide. That's lioncitywildcats@gmail.com. And without much further ado, I'll hand back to Jack. Thanks, Jack.
Great. Thank you very much. That's an awesome email. All right, for today's event, your moderator is Maqui Parkerson. Now, Maqui currently serves as Vice President of Labor Relations and Sustainability at the Union Pacific Railroad. Maqui has a long career in the railroad industry, having also worked at the Kansas City Southern Railway Company, as well as the Norfolk Southern Corporation. Now, as a fellow railroader myself, I am very happy to see a woman of color in a leadership position, especially in this heavy industrial business. Now, while Maqui was at Northwestern, she majored in economics and mathematical methods in the social sciences, or better known as MMSS. She was a great scholar. In fact, she was a Phi Beta Kappa, as well as president of her sorority. And very impressively, she was a leader on the varsity lacrosse team. Now, Maqui went on to receive her JD degree from the William and Mary Law School, as well as a Master's of Science degree from the University of Denver. But most importantly, Maqui is a volunteer leader at NUA5, and she is the moderator for today's event. So without further ado, we will send it back to Maqui.
Thanks, Jack. And welcome to everybody who joined the webinar. Very, very excited to put this panel together. So when Jack asked me to put together the panel in the sustainability space around Earth Day, I really wanted to find a topic that was relevant to our membership and the entire alumni community. So I reached out to Mike McMahon at the Institute for Sustainability and Energy at Northwestern, and we kicked around some ideas. Now, plastics recycling was already on my mind. I had just learned that Union Pacific purchases 25 million bottles of water each year for its operations. This boggled my mind. So I knew that this was something that I needed to learn more about and understand how to really get my head around the problem. The second thing is I just read an article about how 80% of the plastic in the oceans originates in Asia, and that 5 Asian countries, including my own ancestral country, the Philippines, contributed about 60% of that pollution. And so the idea of this panel was born. Now you're going to hear from speakers from 2 organizations, isen, which is Northwestern's Institute for Sustainability and Energy, as well as the Alliance to End Plastic Waste. isen was established in 2009 to really coordinate efforts across the university that related to sustainability. Very proud of the efforts that that organization has undertaken. The Alliance to End Plastic Waste is a global nonprofit founded in 2019 to end plastic waste in the environment. The Alliance is a great example of private corporate investment and solutions to public problems. So now, our speakers. From isen, you'll be hearing from Mike McMahon, the Strategic Partnerships Administrator. In his current role, Mike helps lead transformational collaboration efforts with internal and external partners, including the development of jointly sponsored research initiatives. Prior to joining isen, Mike worked in energy and environmental public policy in the Midwest and Mid-Atlantic regions. With us from the Alliance is Neeva Candelori, Director of the Americas at the Alliance, based out of San Francisco. In her current role, Neeva plans and directs administrative, financial, and operational activities for the Vice President of the Americas and provides oversight, guidance, and support to the North and South America regional groups. Prior to joining the Alliance, Neeva worked for Covestro, formerly Bayer Material Science, in public affairs and advocacy roles, working to embed circular design thinking and collaboration across Asia Pacific. Excuse me. Also with us from the Alliance is Bing Chomprasob. He is the head of partnership development and stakeholder engagement at the Alliance, based in Singapore. In his current role, Bing directs and manages the Alliance's relationships with non-business stakeholders. Prior to joining the Alliance, Bing worked at various international development organizations, including the World Economic Forum in Geneva, Switzerland, where he was responsible for shaping the regional agenda in ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and for developing public-private partnerships aimed at tackling global challenges from education to sustainable development. Clearly a very credentialed panel. I'm really excited about what we're going to learn. With that, I'll turn it over to Mike.
Well, thanks, Maqui, and thanks to Jack, to you, to Audrey, to your teams for hosting us today. And big thanks to Bing and Neeva from the Alliance to End Plastic Waste. You'll hear from them, but they're doing a lot of great work in this space, and I'm excited for today's conversation. I'm going to share a presentation and tell you a bit about who we are and the scope of the problem that we're sort of talking about. So as Maqui mentioned, my name is Mike McMahon. I'm with the Institute for Sustainability and Energy at Northwestern University. I know there's a lot of alums in the audience, so great to connect with you as well. If you're interested in learning more about isen, feel free to reach out to me. I can obviously direct you to the website and things like that as well. And my role at isen is strategic partnerships administration. So I really look for ways to connect the work that we're doing on campus with folks who are doing applied work outside of our campus walls. And Alliance to End Plastic Waste is a great example of some of the folks that we like to work with. So we're here today to talk about plastic waste. And there's some folks in the audience who may know a bit and some who may know less. So what is the challenge that we're talking about here? I'm going to fly through this somewhat quickly. I'm happy to share my slides at the end of the presentation as well. But to provide a bit of context for the type of challenge that we're talking about today. 8.3 billion is the number of tons of plastic produced globally since the 1950s. 300 million, the amount of additional tons of plastic waste that's generated per year. 50% of the waste of the plastic that's generated is designed as single-use. 79% historically ends up in landfills or in the environment. 2050 is the year where the Ellen MacArthur Foundation predicts that there will be more plastic in the ocean than fish by mass. And 39 2000 is the average annual human microplastic consumption that we all together through drinking water. So how did we get here? Well, it's been going on for a long time. I mean, we'll talk a bit about how things have ramped up, but plastic really came to be in the early 1900s, 1907 to be exact, when the first fully synthetic plastic was created. 1920, the discovery of polymers, which is a lot more robust formation of bound molecules. The 1930s and 40s, we saw plastic production and innovation ramp up, due in large part to World War II. 1950s and 60s, you saw that that innovation applied to consumer products and commercialization. 1980s, that commercialized application of plastic accelerated. The plastic waste generation in the 1990s tripled since the 1970s. It tripled in just 2 decades. And by the time we hit the year 2000, the output of plastic waste rose more in a single decade than in the past 40 years combined. So what does that look like? You can see here the acceleration of plastic production as it's occurred since the 1950s, when World War II was occurring and was primarily used in industrial and military applications. But we're talking about a huge ramp up. I mean, here you can see the different slices of the graph, which represent different types of plastic. But you can see, I mean, even since 2015, how much this has really ramped up, and it's only accelerated since then in the last 7 years. So who are we and what are we doing about it? Well, I'm with the Institute for Sustainability and Energy at Northwestern University, or ISIN. As Maqui mentioned, we are a university-wide institute focused on transformational research, interdisciplinary education, and public engagement around all things energy and sustainability. Plastic is a primary concern for us, but it's not the only thing that we do, of course. We work across engineering, natural and social sciences, business, law, public health, and more. So I'm sure there's a lot of folks here in the audience from McCormick, Weinberg, Kellogg, Medill, and the law school, Feinberg, everything in between we work with. ISIN's strategy is really built around 2 pillars, one focused on climate and energy transition, and the other on resilient communities. Plastics really falls in both, a bit more in the resilient communities pillar, but climate energy transition is also of importance when it comes to plastic, when it comes to plastic feedstocks, and then also the energy that goes into plastic productions. So our program on plastics, ecosystems, and public health, or PEPH, was something that ISIN launched in 2019, the same year I believe that the Alliance was founded, actually. And in recognition of the growing problem of plastic waste accumulation and use. And the purpose of PEPH, or the Program on Plastics, Ecosystems, and Public Health, is to accelerate scalable solutions that address challenges related to the global use and accumulation of plastics. So we do that by forming interdisciplinary teams of experts from across Northwestern. But we recognize at ISIN that Northwestern, as great as it is, we can't do everything alone, especially with challenges associated with a problem of this scale and scope. So we partner, really our alliances are extremely important to the work that we do at PEPH. So we partner with academic, civic, NGO, and industrial institutions to really develop scalable solutions to these challenges. And of course, the scalability is very, very important when we talk here about plastic waste challenges, because really any solution is going to be market driven, and it needs to apply to market needs when it comes to solutions that we may develop in the lab. So these are our thrusts, our research thrusts for the program on plastics, ecosystems, and public health. These were developed through focused workshops with our academic, NGO, and industrial partner institutions over a series of months. I won't run through each bulleted point here, but suffice to say, we look at materials and product innovation, air, land, and water, ecosystem dynamics, and public health impacts. And of course, we go within these research thrusts and then work across them, which is something that really makes this program unique. So how does PEPH operate? Well, we work across our network. Although it's housed at Northwestern and at isen specifically, the program really operates for the benefit of all member organizations. Again, that spans research, industry, NGO, stakeholder partners. The purpose is to really streamline collaborative work around research, communications, funding opportunities, to maximize impact and to reduce potential duplicative efforts. As I mentioned, a challenge of this scale really requires this type of quick mobilization. So bringing all these folks to the table is really paramount to solving the issue of plastic waste. We form targeted relationships with research, industry, and funding agencies in the US, especially, although not exclusively. We also work in a global environment, as does the Alliance to End Plastic Waste. And we leverage the network to catalyze team science across disciplines through focused matchmaking among experts. Here you can get a snapshot of some of the folks that are involved with the program on plastics, ecosystems, and public health. As you can see here, it's a good cross-section of NGO partners, folks like World Wildlife Fund, the Nature Conservancy, the Alliance to End Plastic Waste, national laboratories, Argonne, NREL, a sampling of great universities here, and then industry partners. We really think that industry is really important ally when it comes to addressing issues of plastic waste and in the environment and in our ecosystems. And I should say as well, one of the reasons we partner with industry, I assume that the Alliance would share this view. At isen, we don't really think that plastic is bad in and of itself. It's done great work. It's been super important when it comes to things like food preservation, poverty alleviation. It's a highly engineered material that is cheap to produce. It's incredibly light and it's incredibly durable. I think there's a lot of really great applications for plastic. The question is, how do we make those uses more sustainable? And how do we make those uses, how do we make the production occur with those end uses, with the end of life in mind? And we work with this consortium to make that happen. A few samples of what PEPH has done over the years, especially in recent years. Since COVID, we pivoted to invitation-only online workshops. This is just a sample of some of the seminars we put together in the last few months. Again, we bring network members together to share research, to share questions that they're interested in exploring, and to share, to help to carve a path forward when it comes to addressing challenges associated with the global use and accumulation of plastics. We have a webinar coming up next week, actually, focused on public health impacts of microplastics, which I'm really interested to explore. Here you can see, we bring in folks from academia, industry, national laboratories, federal agencies as well. Here's a sampling of some of the folks who attend and participate in our seminars. You can get a breakdown here of the graph on the right. So it's, we are a university, so it's 45% academic participation. But again, you can see those other samplings there, government agencies, NGO, and industry make up a sizable portion. The chart there on the left is by no means exhaustive. It gives you a sense of the types of organizations that we work with through these seminars, some of the biggest players in this space. Of course, the program and network itself does not just exist to put on events and things like that, although that's important. In collaboration and the exchange of ideas is very important in this space. But we produce also cutting edge research when it comes to materials and product innovation, ecosystem dynamics, and public health impacts around the global use and accumulation of plastics. And again, these aren't all Northwestern folks that are putting these out. These are our broad network members, and we're proud and happy to support them. I'm winding down here with my presentation, and we'll talk more, but to shine a spotlight on some of our recent accomplishments, here you can see some major achievements. $12.8 million award through the Department of Energy focused on catalytic upcycling of plastics, known as ICOOP. Resin is also a consortium of partners within Northwestern and then industry partners as well, focused on sustainable polymers, recycling methods, and environmental impact assessment tools. We're also partnering with folks like BASF, who are a major player in the space of plastics production, and looking at ways to upcycle polyurethane, which is sort of the spongy, traditionally very hard plastic to upcycle. It's a spongy material often found in things like cushions, that sort of spongy yellow material is often polyurethane. We work with World Wildlife Fund, not only on basic research, but developing a global policy framework for governing the global use and accumulation of plastic waste. Some of the things that we'll discuss later, the United Nations has recently passed in partnership with World Wildlife Fund some really interesting measures looking at the global use of plastics. We're also looking at environmental justice is a very important component here also, where we see a lot of plastic pollution, and then also waste collection facilities, waste collection and processing facilities tend to be built in environmental justice communities. And then also, of course, looking at bio-inspired materials and bio-inspired filtration systems to deal with plastic waste. For folks in the audience, this is how we engage with industry, researchers, NGOs, donors and sponsored research agencies. It boils down to, and as I said, I'll share these slides at the end, but it boils down to working with Northwestern to help solve this problem. And there are sponsored research opportunities, there are donor engagement opportunities, there are experiential learning opportunities. Northwestern, of course, is a hub of education as well. So finding ways to educate and incorporate that work into our curriculum is something that's very important to us, whether it be in the classroom or experiential. And then also participating in workshops and chances to bring folks together and really share ideas and get some of these ideas in the laboratory, and then ideally after testing and proof of concept, to get that out of the laboratory and really in a space where it can be commercialized, scaled, and make a true impact in this area. If you want additional information about this program, additional things that isen does, I'm Mike McMahon, my email address is listed here. Dimitri Giannissis is also someone I work very closely with, and she is isen's Senior Managing Director. I don't want to take up more of the time here. I'm curious to hear what the Alliance has to say and how to engage in some great discussion with you all. Thanks.
Good evening for those of you in the United States. Good afternoon to those of you in Europe, and good morning to those in Asia. I'd like to thank Northwestern for this opportunity to have myself and Bing present to you today on behalf of the Alliance to End Plastic Waste. This is a really important topic for us, and I could see it's also a really important topic for you as well. So we're really pleased to have you here tonight. First, what I'd like to do is share with you how the Alliance is working on this problem as an organization, and really maybe begin this conversation by laying out a little bit about how big this challenge is. And I think some of this it's gonna be a repeat, because Mike also, I think, is very aligned in having some of the same information. So we can go to the next slide. So as you know, this is a problem of global proportion, and ending plastic waste in the environment is really an ambitious goal. And to really put it into perspective, and I think some of this, Mike, you had also mentioned earlier, if we look at 1950, the world produced 2 million tons of plastic waste a year. Today, we're producing over 380 million tons of plastic waste a year. And if it continues at this pace, as Ellen MacArthur said, by 2050, the weight of the plastic waste that's now in the world's oceans may equal that to all of the fish that's in the ocean. Of the 380 million tons, only 70% is collected, and only 10% of that amount, which is a bit more than 25 million tons, is actually recycled. So that's why the Alliance really was formed. We want to work together across the value chain to end plastic waste in the environment. Next. And to solve this problem, a systems change in the plastics value chain really is needed. And this can only be done through collective action and collaboration across the value chain. Plastic production is expected to rise due to population growth, also an increase in plastic demand. And at the same time, companies are making sustainability commitments, many of them which you have seen out there, which has also created a very strong demand now for recyclates or PCR from the end market. So this is also being triggered by regulations, for example, the EU Green Deal or the UN Global Treaty on Plastic Pollution, and also by targets that have been set by brand owners, particularly in the food and beverage packaging sector as well. So this has really created an urgency to enable activities that will increase the supply of recycled resin quickly to enable circular solutions to go back into the economy. And as you can see with the chart on the right-hand side of this slide, companies today now have a significant shortfall for what they could actually put back into their products based on the commitments that they're making publicly. And now the question for us is really, how do we close that gap? Next. So the Alliance is working to support the transition towards a plastic circular economy, and our immediate focus really is on improving plastic waste management solutions. So we do this through a cross-value chain approach, working directly with the CEOs to take collective action and to act. We're working with companies at the that are oil and chemical companies, down to brand and retailers, down to equipment manufacturers and waste management companies as well. Our objective is really to align with the SDGs, and the projects that we work on must be sustainable, scalable, have a catalytic impact, and most importantly, be circular. So what I'd like to do now is share a short video to just introduce you to the Alliance.
Today, investments in scalable business models that support the transition to a circular economy are growing rapidly across all asset classes and sectors. Companies and investors alike realize the value of reducing production costs, becoming less resource dependent, generating new sources of revenue, and managing risks. The global plastic and packaging industries, together with the recycling and waste management sectors, represent around $1 trillion of economic activity. Historically, these industries have operated with linear supply chains. But today, we see imperative transformation as the plastic value chain embraces circular economy principles. With quickening speed, the global plastic waste challenge of today is becoming the investment opportunity of tomorrow. The Alliance to End Plastic Waste and our partners invest, kickstart, de-risk and scale projects on the ground and across the world. Each of them bridges the circularity gaps in the plastic waste value chain. Every day, we rethink and redesign the plastic waste challenge to unlock value. In our next phase, the Alliance aims to collaborate and innovate to create high ESG impact while delivering attractive corresponding financial returns. We will connect capital to the plastic circular economy. Join us.
So at launch, the Alliance strategy was created to focus entirely on high leakage geographies in the world. This meant a heavy emphasis on Southeast Asia as well as India, where 5 of the most polluted rivers in the world are located and where most plastic comes from before entering our oceans. Today, these high leakage geographies, including Thailand and Malaysia, in addition to the 5 that are listed on this slide, and India, of course, remain critical to our mission. However, we've also recognized the need to work in more sophisticated settings too, meaning starting to do some work in Europe as well as North America, where investment is needed to prove and de-risk solutions further up the waste hierarchy. To address the management of plastic waste, we created a conceptual framework on what needs to be done to really shift from a linear to a circular economy. And we've identified through our work 6 gaps that really stand in the way of circularity. For example, quantity of PCR, as mentioned, we want to increase access to the collection of that. The quality of PCR, we have to increase and improve sorting to reduce contamination. And if you look at, for example, design, where we look at optimizing material use and we consider alternatives in design for recycling itself, and even the data component. We're creating a database called PRISM that one day will allow you users to integrate and view multiple plastic waste data sets, because a lot of that, there's a gap in that information today. So we apply this conceptual framework to every project that we implement in the Alliance and ensure that at least one or more of these circularity gaps gets closed in that process. So this gap analysis forms the roadmap for us through which we aim to support the transition towards a plastic circular economy. And our work on the ground has been to demonstrate how these gaps can be closed through real-life applications and pilot models, which you'll hear a little bit about shortly. Within the Alliance, we have 4 strategic areas of focus. Infrastructure, where we spend a good more than 50%, closer to 60% of our funds towards innovation, education, and cleanup. So everything that we do, all of our projects really need to fit into one of these 4 categories. We also work with a global network of industry leaders across the value chain, not only within the industry itself, but also government, nonprofits, and partners like Northwestern to develop innovative solutions that can address plastic waste issue in the environment. And our focus is to collaborate and partner because, in our view, no one organization can do this alone, and it's really a challenge. And despite the network that we have today, more resources are needed to tackle this growing plastic waste challenge. To that point, we've also built a portfolio of more than 35 projects across more than 80 cities to divert plastic waste from the environment. And these projects really focus on developing, de-risking, and deploying solutions that have lasting impact, starting from proof of concept leading to commercialization, so we can provide viable technical solutions. And as an example, on the partnership side, we work with Plug and Play, who some of you may have heard about. They are an incubator where they host 90-day accelerator programs for startups, and they help raise capital for those with solutions in ending plastic waste. And we work closely with them. And some of these startups get brought into our projects, or for example, the public or the companies that are members of the Alliance work with them directly on their own projects. We also help scale socially oriented enterprises to help them transition to more mature commercial operations with a potential for investment. And I think some of these will be examples, and I'd like to turn it over now to Bing, and he's going to share with you some examples of things that we're working on across the globe.
Great, thank you, Neeva, and hopefully everyone could hear me okay. Good morning from Singapore, and Thank you to Northwestern for hosting this event and allowing the Alliance to participate. So as Neeva mentioned, we wanted to give you a flavor of some of our global projects, and I'll be sharing with you some examples of what we're doing here in Asia. And then I'll hand back to Neeva to share some of the examples of what we're doing in the North American context. But I want to start here with one project that we're implementing in the island of Bali in Indonesia, where we're building a integrated waste management solution where there wasn't one previously. So the specific community that we're working in Bali is in the northwest portion of the island. It's a community called Jembrana that has a population of around 150,000 people. And as I mentioned, this is an area where collection has been quite limited and where the handling infrastructure was lacking. So what the Alliance has done together with our partner Systemic through this Project Stop initiative was really build for the first time a system to collect, to sort, as well as to sell waste and recyclables. And so you could see here an example. The photo on the right is kind of a trike that has two different colors, yellow and green. And so what we've started to do was to introduce bins and bags at the household level for families to start segregating their waste. And so, of course, you have your yellow bins and your green bins for organics. Actually, there's three. We have organics, inorganics, and recyclables. And then the trike drivers. And so this is all very new. These vehicles, as well as the whole collection process, was just established through this project. They would go to the households and then collect the waste and then transfer it to these material recovery facilities that the Alliance helped to build. But just wanted to highlight the distinction of the colors, because where it was really important to signal to families that the waste that was being collected wasn't just being thrown into one single bin. So all of the efforts to source segregate at home, we wanted to make sure that that wasn't perceived as being wasted. And so this was an early learning. Having that color coding was extremely important to have on these vehicles. And then in terms of the economic viability of these projects, for the first time, we're collecting household collection fees for the collection of waste. So there's a lot of work that's being done to educate households on the need to start paying for this type of service. And so a crucial component of the project is actually engaging with the community, working with local NGOs to work on that behavior change. So I wanted to show you just a very short video to give you a sense of what the situation looks like on the ground. So let me play this, and then I'll proceed in sharing the story in Indonesia.
So here we are. We've stopped at what we call an illegal hotspot or a dumping area, which is basically where the population find a spot to dispose of their waste because they have no other alternative. You just see here's the side of the road. People are just stopping, pulling over, and throwing their waste down into this ravine where you've got, as you can see, you've just got a huge amount of waste sitting down here. This is all because there's no other system. And I don't know if the camera does it any justice, but the scale here is just incredible. You can even see up the top here, there's a road. People would stop at the top of that road and throw their waste down. So you can see it just spilling all the way down the hill here. It's these types of things that we see all around Indonesia and all around Malang. And this is the first, by providing an option, this can then stop. So once we've got this option ready, we're hoping that we'll come and see these things as a thing of the past. So, we're really looking forward to getting started, because none of us want to see this anymore.
Great. So that was actually our project manager, Toby, and that footage was very recent. Toby is based here in Singapore with me, but he was in Malang in the eastern part of Java a few weeks ago, where we're looking to build on a lot of the learnings from our project in Chomprasob and to expand and bring to scale this integrated waste management solution for the entire island of Java across 3 different regencies, which are sub-provincial level units. But what you see, I think what's so striking from that video is that this waste, this dire waste situation is really prevalent throughout all of Indonesia and in a lot of these emerging economies that we're working in. And so that footage, as I mentioned, was in Malang, where we're looking to establish the first of 3 different project sites, which is the scale up of the Chomprasob model. You could see in terms of the population scale, we're moving from 150,000 folks to 6.5 million. And I did a quick search on, just to try to compare this to what may be more known for the audience here. I think the Cook County in Illinois, where Chicago is located, has a population of 5 million. So what we're looking to establish for the very first time is an entirely new public utility to collect waste for a population that's the entire size of the greater Chicago area. So it's very significant. And you could see also in terms of volumes, we're looking to significantly increase the amount of solid waste that's being collected, which of course includes plastic waste. And of course, this will lead to new livelihood and economic development opportunities as well. So this gives you a sense of the kind of the size and scale that we're looking to operate at. We realize that to really significantly address some of those figures that were shared by Neeva and by Mike earlier, we have to be operating at this level. And I'll just briefly go through, I know I'm just taking check of the time. I'll just briefly go through some of a few other examples in other countries. This is an initiative called the Plastic Flamingo. It's a social enterprise in the Philippines that's recycling plastic waste and producing what they call eco lumbers, which are these what's shown here on the right. Essentially, these are substitutes for construction material that could be used to build post-disaster shelters. And so, of course, the Philippines is disaster prone. There's typhoons that come on an annual basis. And instead of using other materials, there's alternatives to use these eco lumbers that include plastic waste. So these are the type of organizations, social enterprises that the Alliance is looking to support as well. And I wanted to share this example from China because China is more sophisticated market where the recycling mindset and culture has been more established. And so here we're able to introduce more sophisticated technology. So there, in terms of collection sites, you have here on the left these manual collection points where community members could come, deposit their waste, and you could see that there's different different bins for different material streams. But what's interesting is you see here, this photo in green is an automated or a smart bin. So we're able to pilot, to test, to really experiment with these more advanced technologies to optimize collection and sortation. And then just 2 final examples from India. Wanted to give you a flavor of the kind of community engagement and the societal behavior work that we're engaging in. So we fund this organization called SASEO, which is an NGO in India, to work on educating school children on the role of plastics, on waste segregation, on plastic types, and other really important information on dealing with waste. And so this is a project that we're rolling out in 2 locations in Kolkata and in a more rural context in Sundarbans. And it's the goal here is to see whether or not we could pilot, test these educational initiatives and really bring it to scale throughout the country. And then lastly, from India, I just wanted to share this quick example of this. You see here on the photo, a woman scanning a QR code with her mobile device. And this is an example of really integrating digitalization into the process. So what the QR code has is information around the type of plastic, the type of waste that's being collected. It's tagged to a household. So that QR code is actually on the wall of a household. So this initiative is bringing in informal waste pickers and really formalizing their roles, making them into these household collectors, going door to door and assisting in the process of collecting that plastic waste. But what this technology allows for, this traceability technology, it allows for MRFs really to understand the type and the quality. Going back to those circularity gaps that Neeva was mentioning, it provides really invaluable information for us to characterize and to understand the waste that's coming into these material recovery facilities. So with that, let me hand back to Neeva to share a few more examples from the US context. So,
yeah, thanks, Bing. So we have a program also it's in Omaha, Nebraska. It's called Firstar Fiber, which is a MRF operator. They are taking hefty energy bags and collecting those curbside, and they're getting delivered to Firstar Fiber. Those bags previously were collected, they were put on the side, and then they were delivered actually to a cement kiln. So what we're trying to do is get back that flexible film, and the Alliance went ahead and funded the equipment for a plastic pre-processing facility, or PEPH, at Firstar Fiber, and that is expected to start up sometime later this summer. Essentially, the hefty energy bag contents, as well as other films that are collected in the MRF, and industrial films are being collected, and they're going to be put through this PEPH to sort out the contaminants, and then they'll be shredded and they'll compress the plastic into a pellet. And compressing it into a pellet makes it easier for transportation and easier for use by the end markets. So phase one includes installation of a plastic lumber operation at Firstar Fiber after this PEPH is operational. And then as they ramp up going into phase two, they're going to look at some additional bolt-on operations that will help use up the rest of the PEPH capacity. And then we have also what we're calling a U.S. Cities Transformation Program. And this is really at the very early stages. Here we're looking at 5 cities. We worked with Eunomia to do a study and evaluate 30 of the largest metropolitan cities across the United States, narrowed that further and then further again, and brought it down to 5 cities. One of them being Chicago, Phoenix. We're also looking at New York City and Houston area, as well as San Francisco. And here, what we really want to do is get back flexible films to demonstrate an order of magnitude change and an at-scale transformation around recycling, with definitely with an emphasis for us on film, because that is the largest amount of plastic right now that's going into landfills. We're looking at single family, multifamily, and commercial. And we're really, again, as I said, at the early stages, working with the cities, looking at working with different partners, and still opportunities to expand. We don't have specific projects outlined yet. We just started this process in the last 2 months, really, finalizing after the Eunomia study was done in terms of where we want to look at. And so this is something that will be in the space going forward, and possibly even some opportunities to work more closely with Northwestern in this space as well. And then lastly, what I wanted to do was just introduce you to something that was just announced yesterday. Actually, it went live. It's what we're calling the Alliance Prize. It's a very significant prize to activate ideas for circular solutions for flexible plastics. And what we're really looking for here is a new twist on something that hasn't happened before, but which fits into existing infrastructures across the globe. So this is a global competition with one winner who will receive a $3 million prize reward. And we do intend that this project will attract co-funding as well in the future. But we're really looking for something that can demonstrate a novel idea that has high value output and it needs to be impactful, scalable, feasible, and innovative. So there is a website now. Since we just launched it yesterday, you'll see that on the slide. You're welcome to go to that. It will be a 3-month process before we go ahead and close it. So feel free to share this. And if you would like more information, there is a lot of information on the slide itself, or you can always reach out to me as well. And in closing, I think one of the things we tried to demonstrate is that addressing the global plastic waste issue really is complex, and it also requires local solutions. And at the top of the slide, in developing countries such as Indonesia, you have seen today how ravines show how there's open dumping happening illegally, how trainers are needed to work closely with households to show how to self-segregate waste for collection, and also how manual labor is done for the sorting process, because there are lower labor costs in that part of the world. So change in societal behavior is really critical there. And we also need to start at the beginning of the waste management hierarchy. Whereas when we're working in more developed countries like Europe, United States, where we do have high collection rates, we need to invest in the technologies that are out there now, which are actually really huge investments and also require better quality recycling at the end. So at the end, context matters, and all solutions will require local solutions to meet this global challenge. So with that, thank you very much.
Thanks, Neeva. That was great. There's a lot of information that the panel just presented, and you know, I'm kind of looking at the chat, the questions that are coming into the chat box, and there are some really excellent questions. In the interest of time, I'm just going to ask the panel one question. I do invite anyone who's interested in the panelists to stick around for an extra 10-minute after session. Just there have been so many good questions. We want to make sure that we've addressed as many of them as we can. It almost feels like we could do a series of these because there's such interest. So my question to the panel, and Bing, maybe you're the best one to answer this, but I invite all panelists. One of the themes of the questions that we received before the webinar and even during the chat, how do we put policies in place to address the plastic waste issue? You know, and questions about, is it consumption, is it production, is it infrastructure, what is it? And how do we put those policies in place?
Thanks, Maqui. Maybe I could start, and then I'm sure the others will have comments as well. But I think one really important at the global level, one really important development on the public policy front is what I believe Maqui was mentioning earlier in terms of this global treaty on plastic pollution that will be negotiated over the coming years. There was this UN Environment Assembly that was held in late February, which kicked off this process to negotiate this new global treaty on plastic pollution. So for folks that aren't aware about this yet, essentially what it will be is a Paris type agreement instead of for climate, in this case for dealing with plastic pollution. And so governments are going to have to think very deeply and very carefully around what is that kind of the regulatory, the public policy environment that will need to be in place to look at all of those different points that you just mentioned, Maqui, looking at consumption, looking at production, looking at also the financing for these plastic waste solutions. So we as an alliance are looking forward to closely engaging in that process. I think we could demonstrate, we could signal to governments that there are these solutions out there that are being piloted. We're looking at new innovative ways of financing. We know that kind of traditional mechanisms to draw down on government budgets to fund these environmental issues is not significant enough. We have to look at perhaps mobilizing capital from the private sector. And so those are some of the conversations that we look to integrate into this negotiation process over the coming years. But perhaps Neeva or Mike would like to add as well.
Go ahead, Mike, if you'd like to add anything.
Wrong button. Yeah, the question was about policy, Maqui. Yeah, I think, you know, I would echo what Bing highlighted. I think the the work that's been done at the United Nations, in partnership with a lot of industry folks, a lot of, people like World Wildlife Fund, big players in the space, is really heartening to see. And it, as currently envisioned, will be legally binding. So I'm really curious to see how that shakes out. I'm not sure, one policy intervention that is talked about a lot, which I think holds a lot of water. I'm not sure what the Alliance thinks of it. Personally, we haven't really talked about it, but the idea of extended producer responsibility is really interesting. Taking some of the onus off of governments and to some extent consumers, or at least sort of shifting the balance a bit more onto producers and making them, through policy incentives, some carrots, some sticks, depending on their various sort of structures. You can think through this, but encouraging producers to think about the end of life of if we're recycling, if we're reusing, if we're talking about circular economy model, incentivizing folks to think about the end of life or end of use of the materials that they're producing. And that can be done in a variety of ways and a variety of structures. But I think it's a really interesting policy mechanism. And I have seen many large producers come out in favor of this, folks like PepsiCo and Mars and things like that, who are big players in the space. That's some policy interventions. I mean, from a research side of things, seeing especially the federal government get involved to catalyze universities working with industry, I think is really, really important. And you're seeing some of that through the Department of Energy, especially. EPA is doing a bit. NIST, the National Institute for Standards of Technology, Department of Commerce is also doing a bit. But finding forums to bring industry and university researchers together to find scalable solutions, I think is really, really promising and something we've found that's been really effective. And I'm excited and heartened by the federal government's and local, state and local governments, but especially federal government, the initiative that they've taken, and I hope it continues.
Neeva, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I would just add to that, when it comes to policy interventions, they do need to prevent leakage. They need to encourage circularity. They also need to be science-based so that we can minimize any environmental damage or any other unintended consequences. And I think some of these things, whether it's EPR, bottle bills or whatnot, there's a lot of proof that they do increase recycling habits as well. So I think you need to look at the whole big picture when it comes to that.
Great. So I think a few people have dropped off. We're a little bit over our hour. Just really encouraging to have so much interest and really, really good questions about the issue. So thank you everyone for participating. Thank you to the panelists and everyone who organized the panel and made this happen. I think, Jack, you're going to run the after session, right?